Many of us attribute a long life to healthy living and good genetics. But after studying centenarians all over the world, our next guest found that cultural and spiritual beliefs play an even bigger role in long-term health and longevity than good genes. Here now to tell us more, Mario Martinez. He is a neuropsychologist and the author of The Mind-Body Code. Good to have you here at TVO. How are you?
Doing well. Pleasure to be here.
Do you know what city you are in?
I'm a little disoriented. I've been in Manila and Nashville, but I'm glad I'm in Toronto.
You're in Toronto. Very good. You got the first answer correct. Well, let's find out just a little bit about you, because you're based in Montevideo, Uruguay, and you're the founder of a theory called biocognitive science. Would you help us understand a little more about what that means?
Yes, I had to actually invent the word because cognition looks at thinking. Biology, of course, looks at our biological processes, and I think that they're inseparable. Biocognition is really biology and cognition inseparably working together. But in addition to that, then there's a culture, the cultural component. So it's mind-body within a cultural context. We can't get away from the culture. So it was a science that brought together areas that were not communicating with each other. Psychoneuroimmunology, PNI, which looks at how thoughts and emotions affect the immune system and other systems. And then anthropology, that looks at cultural beliefs and so forth, but they weren't really sharing their discoveries and the things that they were contributing to the science. So it's really a convergence of these fields.
Let's go through this. How do you think culture influences the body?
Well, we were born to a culture. We have a medical culture, we have a religious culture. For example, people practicing Catholicism here in Toronto are not the same as people practicing it in Brazil. So you're born to a culture. In the United States, the attribution to a migraine is a vascular problem. If you go to UK, it's gastrointestinal. You go to France, and it's hepatic, liver. So the culture really shapes the belief systems, and belief systems then are shaping the biology.
Could you give us an example of how bad cultural habits would have a negative impact on the body?
Okay. We are creating I do quite a bit of work with Fortune 100 companies, teaching executives that they have created an organizational culture that actually creates illnesses. So 75% of successful leaders have gastrointestinal problems. What they do is that the body was made for ritualistically eating. They take their iPhones to lunch, and they take their computers to dinner, and the immune, nervous, and endocrine system don't work that way. When you're eating, everything slows down and it speeds up the appetite, digestion. But if you're thinking of who's going to call you, or if you're concerned about something, then you're speeding up your system and slowing down the digestion. So that kind of on and off eventually turns into what people call gastrointestinal problems. And you treat it with medication, and you're treating the effect, not the cause.
So the better approach would be what?
If you eat without any technology. You don't watch television and eat, because actually the brain doesn't know that it's not happening. Cognition knows, but the brain doesn't know this. So if you're watching a rape, you're going to have cortisol, and you're going to have hormones of stress that are going to come out, and it's not really the best context for digestion.
So the person who invented the TV dinner has done more to ruin our health than anybody.
I think so. I think they've done a major contribution.
Did I hear you right? You said 75% of corporate executives have gastrointestinal problems?
Yes, and it's really across the board. And it's astounding when you think about it, and especially the successful ones. And one of the things that I do is teach them how to really create what I call the proper archetype. The archetypes are basically things that we have developed ontologically. We have, for hundreds of thousands of years, we know that one archetype, the father, works best with the son and the daughter, but the father doesn't work well with a partner or with a lover. So when you mix archetypes, the biology is turning off in a way as if you're, for example, trying to hammer something with a screwdriver. So what we do is, then we take the warrior to work, and we bring it back, and then we deal with our children as warriors rather than father, mother. Those kinds of things not only disrupt the family, but disrupt the health of the individual. The chronic illnesses that are caused by these things are about $14 trillion a year. It could feed the hungry for the next 10 years.
I got to ask, how do you know that?
Well, from the statistics that are showing that the total global production, what the world produces, is $74 trillion.
Okay.
And 14 trillion goes to the treatment of chronic illnesses and health care. Even with companies that supposedly are having good health care and good beautiful offices and good salaries, but the organizational culture that they build, which is, for example, you can get people sick doing two things in an organization. Give them a job with responsibility without authority, or give them a job without meaning. That's what a lot of corporations do, because it's a legacy from rat psychology. It doesn't work. So when you do that, then what's happening is the culture itself is making people sick independent of all the wonderful things that they're getting, the beautiful office and the child care and the good health care. Those things are necessary, but they're not sufficient to keep the health of the corporation.
Well, I gather one of the fastest growing demographics nowadays is centenarians.
Yes.
People who live to be 100. And you have studied these people. And I guess the conventional wisdom has always been they live a long time because they inherited good genes from their parents.
That's what I thought.
You've got some other ideas.
There are about 2,000 centenarians in Canada.
Huh.
And some in Saskatchewan, and I believe there maybe a couple in Toronto. But and 80,000 in the U.S. is the fastest growing segment of the population in the U.S. and other places. What I thought at first is I would study a centenarian, a 102-year-old person. I would ask him, what's the secret? And they would say, well, I have some rum before I go to sleep. And I thought, oh, it's got to be the quality of the rum. Somebody else would say, I have a cigar. What I found was that the ritual, independent of what they did, the ritual gave them an identity that had a psychoneuroimmunological value. And then as I continued to work with them all over the world, I found that genetics is really 35%. The rest is the cultural beliefs that they have. And what do we do culturally? We put people away at 65. Neuropsychologically, now we know that from 65 to 85, they have the most, what I would call human capital. Well-developed intellect, emotional maturity, tremendous knowledge of what they do, and yet they're put away. And they go somewhere to Florida to watch the sunset, and they live on the average 6 years because of the lack of meaning. The brain was made to have meaning and to have discovery, not to go watch the sunset.
Use it or lose it.
That's right, exactly.
I'm curious as to how you were able to quantify, though, that the 65-35 you just told us about a moment ago, that 35% was genes and 65% was everything else.
Well, because as I looked at their genetics, genealogy and so forth, one example would be one centenarian at 102, you would ask him, well, how old was your dad when he died? 70. My mother, 80. Somebody else would say 50. So there's really, the correlation came to about 35%, rather than what we think would be genetics.
Do most centenarians come from a particular class or background?
No, that's another thing, that they cross, that it was thought that they were from rural areas, and they thought that by being at the base of mountains, there's the minerals. Across cultures, across socioeconomics, more women than men, but men are catching up. And the only thing about it is that there are no obese centenarians. But some of them are hefty. And there's some research now that's showing that people that are, and I'm not supporting this, but I'm just saying this, is people who are slightly overweight and are healthy actually live longer than people who are underweight.
Yes, I've heard that before too.
So there's some new movements now in the studies of obesity that are really interesting, as well as with centenarians.
But you mentioned a moment ago somebody who lived to be 100 who has a cigar every day.
Yes.
Now, there's nothing, I wouldn't have thought there was anything remotely healthy about having a cigar every day. Is there?
Well, the thing about it is that moderation is the key. Many of them smoke, but you don't see them smoking a cigar and then a cigar, and then you ask them, because I do a lot of ethnographic kinds of things with them, and I say, well, are you going to have another one? No, that's all I need. And they may not even finish it. It's just that they go into the moment and the experience of the joy, rather than doing it automatically with the addictive component of it. Okay. So it's a joyful thing, and when you do something joyfully, you don't abuse it. So you don't abuse a cigar, you don't abuse the rum that they have or whatever it is. Very moderate.
Have you got a ballpark number of how many centenarians you would have studied during the course of your research?
About 400.
400.
Yeah.
Would any of them have been atheists?
Yes, there's one atheist, Oscar Niemeyer.
Oh, who just died.
Just died. He was one of the few exceptions. 99.9% have some spiritual beliefs. That's a good question.
So that's not a coincidence, I guess.
No, I don't think it's a coincidence. And I think part of it is that, let's say that God doesn't exist. If you believe that God exists, it's healthier for you. So you can't lose.
This is Flaubert's wager, I guess, right? Okay. So, but if you want to live to be, so are you telling us if you want to live to be 100, it's better that you believe in God?
No, 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 that you have some spiritual belief, that there's something greater than you. And that spiritual belief could be nature. But there has to be something greater than you, so you get out of that narcissism that I am the center of the universe. That's what's healthy. And it just happens that many centenarians, by the way, are not very religious. They're spiritual. But not all of them are very...
Explain what the difference would be there.
They don't go to church every Sunday. They don't pray, but they have spiritual beliefs. They believe that life doesn't end when you die.
Do they believe in God?
They have some sense of God. Some could be nature. Some could be the accumulation of love. Some could be a God that have been humanized. But they have some belief that spiritual in the sense that it's a transcendental process.
Do you break it down even further to see which percentage of the religious/spiritual people actually are very observant, go to church, tithe, whatever?
Yes, well, actually, there's some research that's been done. And at first, it was that, well, religious people are healthier. But then as you start cutting it down and looking at the factors, religious people who have a relationship with a God of love are healthier, not people who have a relationship with a God of fear.
Interesting.
So it's...
I'm afraid to ask the follow-up, but I will. Who would they perceive to... Which religion would be perceived to feature the God of fear?
Well, all religions have subcultures that actually will teach and will modify the sacred texts and so forth and reinterpret things in a way that wasn't meant. Christ didn't want you to suffer. But yet people sometimes believe that you have to suffer in order to be able to have goods and to be able to enjoy things. You have to suffer. That's just a model that's been reinterpreted throughout the years by the theologians.
But your research shows that if you pursue that interpretation of religion, that's not going to get you to 100.
No, because what happens is that here's a cultural process. If you have a fear, whatever it is, a fear of God or a fear of your job, you're going to be on hyper alarm. Your nervous system is going to be on hyperalarm. It's going to be affecting your heart. You're going to be secreting a tremendous amount of cortisol, which slows down immune function, so you're more prone to infections. So there's a consequence for that fear.
Medical advances. Where is that on your list of explanations for why people make it to 100?
I think that the greatest contribution has been with the infections, the antibiotics, and for example, you have a fracture and you take care of the fracture. Systemic problems have not been really dealt very well with medicine. The billions of dollars have gone into it, and you have medications that help you live with the illness rather than cure the illness. So yes, I think infectious diseases, and I think, for example, orthopedic surgeons when you have fractures and so forth. But it's not really. In fact, and again, I'm not supporting this. I'm just reporting it. Several centenarians I've asked, "Do you go to the doctor?" No. Why? Well, to check up for what? There's nothing wrong with me. So I asked one, and so what does your doctor think about it? He said, I don't know, they're all dead. So
the doctors are all dead. They've outlasted their doctors.
Outlasted their doctors.
Okay, that's pretty good. The retirement age, of course, in Canada, they just, I don't know what it's like in the Latin American countries that you hang out in, but they just upped it here, 65 to 67, because the government, I guess, recognizes that people are living longer and healthier.
That's good.
Ought not to therefore be able to tap into their pensions until later in life. Does retiring people at a certain age, whatever that might be, shorten their lifespan?
I think it can. It depends on what they do. If they retire into nothingness, if they retire into what you would, it's counterintuitive because you would think, I've worked so hard all my life and now I'm just going to relax. Well, that relaxing is not good for you. You have to find something that has meaning, something that you're contributing your wisdom, all that knowledge you accumulated. How do you recycle that so that it can be assimilated by other people? Mentoring is a good way. There are many things that you can do. So it's 65. It's a cultural portal. There's no biology there that says that you need to retire. Centenarians that are cognitively intact have been intact beyond 65.
I guess they picked 65 once upon a time when people lived to be 66 or 67,
yeah,
right?
so they wouldn't have to pay too much Social Security because they wouldn't live up to now. That's
completely different.
Completely different. I don't think that there should be a middle age. For example, Ellen Langer, who you've interviewed, has talked about that, and the studies show that one study, people that look significantly younger and people that look significantly older. And when they factored out everything else, they found that the major contributing factor was that the people that look younger thought that middle age was later.
Ah, interesting.
So now I believe middle age starts at 90.
No, but really, when does middle age start?
It shouldn't. That's the thing. That's what I learned from Centenarians. You ask them, what's middle age? And they say, that's foolish. You find out when you die. You don't know. So, because what you're doing is you're coding your system into saying, okay, if it's 45, then it's downhill. And you start giving attributions. No, I'm middle-aged now. I need to be thinking now about, I can't do this anymore because I'm middle-aged. I need to dress like middle-aged. I can't have a sports car because I'm middle-aged. So attributions change, and the admonitions put you into that portal, and you begin to age according to what the culture tells you, rather than your biology.
Can I ask you how old you are?
I don't tell my age.
You never do?
No, you don't.
Because people will pigeonhole you.
If let's say you say you're 80.
Right.
Oh, you look so good for 80, which means that you shouldn't look that good. Or you owe 80. So you lose either way. So what I tell people, I was born in the 20th century.
That's not narrowing it down very much.
No. And you should. And the
Thanks a lot.
Centenarians tell me, no. They say start telling your age after 100 and then lie about it. If you're 100, say you're 130.
Okay. But I guess if people are going to tap into the wisdom that you're bringing forward today, they're going to have to change the way they, if they haven't already, the way they think, the way they act, the way they do, the way they live.
Yes.
How do you teach people who've been doing it a certain way all their lives that if they want to make it to 100, they've really got to radically change the way they do business?
Well, the key is not to change behavior, to change the consciousness that moves the behavior. So, for example, let's say you have a consciousness of self-destructive and especially a self-sabotaging consciousness. And one of the things that you do is overeat. You work on the overeating behavior, and you're going to overdrink because you haven't gone to the core. You have changed the behavior. And one of the things that we try to do is we try to change the consciousness. An example, obesity. Do a lot of work with obesity. I teach people who are obese to love food. And they say, I love food too much already. No, you need food. You don't abuse what you love. You abuse what you need. So then they learn the cues of hunger and then love what they eat. And what they're doing is changing the consciousness of the need into a consciousness of love. And you can love your food, and then you can love your exercise. And
Does that work?
It does. And I'm oversimplifying it because there are techniques and things that are required, and it takes a lot of work. But it does work.
I would presume that a guy like you would be in fairly hot demand by Fortune 500 companies who do not want to see their CEOs and high-ranking corporate executives suffer the way that you have described during our conversation here.
Yes, that's why I travel so much.
You are?
Yes,
you are in hot demand.
I'm doing work with...
So you train corporate executives to live better?
To change consciousness.
Change consciousness.
Because they have to understand that what's making people sick is the organizational culture that they created. And they have these mission statements, and they have all these wonderful things. But the three key components are that we teach the culture to honor the employee rather than seeing them as a production unit. To use the customer not as a prey, but as a consultant. And the competitor not as someone to destroy, but someone to learn from, teacher. And it changes, when you do that indirectly, it's called incidental learning, it changes the consciousness. You don't want to put out your competitor because you become them a monopoly, and then your creativity goes down.
Huh. Let me ask you one last thing about a very particular workplace. Athletics, sports, professional athletes. They are, from the minute they put on the uniform, chastised, denigrated, blasted, yelled at by their coaches, by teammates, and theoretically that gets a better performance out of them. Is that right?
It gets rat psychology performance, but when you look at the health component, it's not really the Bulls, Chicago Bulls, were an example of using Zen Buddhism to teach them to excel without the rat psychology of peak performance. Peak performance is impossible to maintain. You get the numbers, just like executives will say, look, I'm getting the numbers, I'm pushing people here. Well, look at the numbers of the healthcare, and you'll see what it means. That's what I call the shadow cost. You don't see it in the P&Ls. And the same thing with peak performance. Yes, you get it, but you get it at the point of athletes don't have a very long life. Football players, 50, 60 years old.
I think the Bulls had it because Phil Jackson had it, right?
That's right.
He was the coach
exactly.
of the team.
He's basically using some Zen principles of indirect learning, and look what he was able to accomplish.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, Michael Jordan didn't hurt either.
No, that's right. No, it didn't. You have to have talent, but then you have to modify how that talent is developed.
Do you know where you're going next?
I'm going back to Nashville and then Uruguay.
Always on planes, eh?
Yes.
Okay. Mario Martinez, it's really good of you to visit us at TVO tonight. Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.